Hello, everybody, and welcome to our AMJRF virtual town hall. We're so glad that so many of you could set aside some time in the busy weekend to be a part of this. I know there's a lot going on, especially shout out to the folks who are just on the IJRU Congress call. It's going to be a long day of jump rope, but we're glad that you're here with us. My name is Brian Hsu. I'm the Secretary of AMJRF, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. Joining me are several other board members of AMJRF, and we'll introduce them as we continue through the rest of the presentation. So we're going to start today with a 20-minute presentation of some key points from our 2020 through 2021 season kickoff report, which was released last month. It's also on the amjrf.com homepage. And then after that, we're going to wrap up with a Q&A session that's open forum that anyone can participate in, and just feel free to drop your questions here in the Zoom chat anytime during the presentation or during the Q&A itself. And with that, let's get started. So to kick us off, we have a message from our president, Tom LaVecchia. Tom?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AMJRF 2021 season opening town hall. The AMJRF board and I hope you are doing well and are staying healthy. As you can see from the agenda, we're going to go over a few things which take about 15 minutes, and then we'll spend most of the rest of the hour answering questions. You've given us a number of suggestions. One of them is more communications. So this is the start of that, along with the monthly newsletter that we've been putting out. Next slide, please. I want to briefly mention who the board of directors are. 5 of us have been involved for quite a while already. We've added 3 new members. One is Noah Mancuso, the Athlete Advisory Council chairperson. We also have added Dave DeTenley and Gary Hill as members at large. Next slide, please. All right, this is our strategy for 2020. As you know, COVID has pretty much changed our lives in every aspect. We're going to be analyzing and communicating with coaches and other folks like tournament directors to find out what needs you have and how we're going to go forward with the season. Most of it will probably be virtual tournaments and some virtual workshops. As we get inputs, we're trying to create new ideas and new plans to help with tournaments and competitions. One thing we have to do is be flexible and understand there's going to be a lot of changes. Next slide, please. When it comes to COVID, we need you, coaches and tournament directors, to follow their local and state guidelines. We have posted some documents for you to look through. The return to play guidelines, risk management plans, and they are both on the website on the 2021 season kickoff document. Next slide, please. AMJRF is excited to move to the next phase of its organizational operations. Starting in 2021, the board will have elections for the board members. Every 4 years, there will be 4 positions up for election, and the terms of the positions will be 3 years. One of the most common questions is who can run? Anybody can run who is in good standing, is a member of AMJRF and is in good standings. On March 1st, there will be a call for nominations, and anybody who's in good standings can either be nominated or self-nominate. The nominations will be open from April 1st through May 1st. And starting on May 1st, the Voting will begin, and the members who are elected will be announced in June, either at the national championship or by the end of the month, if there is not a national championship. Again, due to COVID, we don't know what's going to be happening. Next slide, please. Here are some of the partnerships we have in place. We are always working on creating new partnerships and continuing partnerships with these folks that are shown here. If you have any suggestions on potential partnerships, please send suggestions to board@amjrf.com or have them contact us through that email address. Next slide. Basically, what we're trying to do is let you know that everything is changing and the way we do things is going to change. So please, when you start engaging the athletes, make sure we're doing it in a safe manner. And also when it comes time to start planning your tournaments and workshops, please let us know so we can publish them. Send information to events@AMJRF. Next slide, please. Brian is going to cover the financials.
All right, thanks, Tom. So unfortunately, our treasurer, Chris Newbar, couldn't be here with us this afternoon. She had some personal matters that came up last minute. So I'm just going to do a broad overview of the financials to the best of my non-accountant abilities. So if we can go to the next slide. So what you see here is a proposed budget for 2020 through 2021. On the left are some numbers that are taken from previous years and then projected to match some of the anticipated effects from COVID. So we're looking at an estimated $21,490 in total receipts for 2021. And then on the right are some projected expenses, also taking into account some of the COVID impacts that will happen throughout this year. So again, this is all projected, but we are doing the best that we can to make sure we're staying informed about what the athlete participation may look like and what the changes may be there, whether or not people will be traveling, whether or not the board can actually travel, things like that. And it's important to note that we had a proposed $30,000 budget for the US national team that was originally scheduled for last year. And we're going to be looking at how that may change this year given current circumstances. All right, I think we're ready for the next slide. And now we're going on to membership. So this year we separated out our membership into two different types. One is the standard membership that you all have purchased before. That was available for any athlete, parent, coach, or person interested in the sport of jump rope. This year we added a new administrative membership, which is the same price, but also supplies some safety features via Sports Engine, which is our member management platform. So what this does is it helps us better align with the Safe Sport Act, which is that any adult who comes into contact with youth should be screened with a background check and some safety training. So any administrator, if you're a coach, a team administrator, or an AMJRF administrator, you should be selecting the administrative membership when you're signing up this year. That's all available. This information is available on the Sports Engine page where you're going to be registering. And then last little note, we heard some feedback last year around transaction costs, and we know that that's kind of an unavoidable burden on everyone. So we negotiated with Sports Engine this year and brought down the $2 transaction fee to $1.25, and then reduced the processing fee by about 0.1%, which, you know, you take what you can get. And next slide, please. With competition, I believe we're going over to Chris Brown.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today and for engaging with us. Like Brian said, my name is Chris Brown. I've been involved in the sport of jump rope for 20 years as an athlete, coach, volunteer, judge, committee member, and more. I'm currently serving as the AMJRF competition committee chair with a great group of people. If we can go to the next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about the national team. So just so we're on the same page, I want to let you know what the national team is. And it's the athletes that qualify to compete at IJRU World Championships. There may be some other competitive opportunities that can come up that they can compete at in between, like a continental championship and an IJRU championship. For example, there was a China Open where the people that had already qualified for the national team were invited to go to that. In terms of how you make the national team, our qualification process has been that athletes have the opportunity to compete at local and regional events, have their events recorded. AMJRF handles that aspect of it. And then video files are submitted and the scores are certified by a panel of judges. Athletes are also able to choose which events they want to certify, so you don't have to pay for every event to be certified. And this was done to reduce the overall cost of qualifying in comparison to having everyone travel to a single national qualifying tournament, which is how it's historically been done. And this is something that we've looked at closely. Currently, the International Jump Rope Union, or IJRU, has allocated 3 qualifying spots to us for their World Championships, and that's in each event, age division, and gender category. And that's for their 3 tournaments. So they have a World Championships for their seniors, Junior World Championships, and an International Open tournament. Part of our first AMJRNC, AMJRF Grands winners, that tournament, so the winners in that Grands competition were promised that they would get a spot on the US national team. So they're going to keep that spot as promised. There are 2 spots currently remaining from IJRU that we can fill, and that will be done with the top scores from the leaderboard. If IJRU allocates more spots to us, which they mentioned as a possibility, then we'll take the next highest scoring athletes from the leaderboard to fill those spots. The one wrinkle in that is that IJRU, because of COVID, postponed their 2020 World Championships to 2021. And so we'll talk about kind of the effects of that. While we're still on the national team, I did want to mention that AMJRF is still currently accepting applications for national team head coach and assistant coaches. I'm going to drop a link in the chat for you. Also on the website, there's an administrative application that you can find. So if you're interested in helping us with kind of the operations of the national team, you can let us know that. If you're able to click on that, or if you're not, you can copy and paste it, but that's where the national team coach application is. So I mentioned the leaderboard in our qualifying process. We have decided to extend that leaderboard through 2021. Originally, our deadline was April 14th to announce the national team. Due to the increase in COVID cases in March, 4 of our national ranking tournaments had to be canceled. And as I mentioned, IJRU postponed their tournament. Because of this, and because a number of athletes missing out on qualifying tournaments, we couldn't complete the competition season as scheduled. We wanted to make sure it was fair for everyone, so we made that decision. That was communicated via email to membership on Monday, March 16th. And so it effectively means that our competition season has been extended. So far, we've judged 968 speed entries. For both speed and freestyle, the judges have access to slow motion, which we're really trying to make sure that they get accurate scores. We've also had 291 freestyle entries. Because of the limited number of judge applicants that we had the first time around, those judges were judging as each of the 4 roles. So it was taking them a significant amount of time to do that. So we want to say a massive thank you to all of our judges and our tech ops team behind the scenes for doing great work on that. We also sent out a tournament survey where we wanted to collect your feedback and kind of organize that and make sure we're making as informed decisions as we can. So thank you to all of you that took the time to fill that out. I'm also going to post a link in the chat, and this is going to show some of the data around what we had. We're not going to show all of the comments just to protect people's privacy, but I personally read through each response, and I also asked the competition committee and board to do the same. We've seen pretty consistent feedback that people are wanting faster scores just to be able to see their scores faster. We want that too, and we understand that athletes would like to have their scores before having to decide whether to recompete an event, and we're working towards that. And I'll mention a few of the ways that we're looking to address that. With the extended competition season, we can't really reasonably make large-scale changes to the process in order to keep it as fair as we possibly can for the jumpers. And so we're going to make some moderate changes since we're in the middle of a competition season, and that way we don't discredit what our athletes have done so far. At the end of the competition season, we will review everything, ask for additional feedback, and we'll make changes to further improve the process where possible. In terms of the changes that I mentioned, we are looking at adding judges. We asked a question around this on our tournament survey, and about 77% of the respondents thought that we should do this. The way that we're going to do that is multifold. So originally we just had an application. We want to kind of broaden our scope and try to get more judges. So we will still have the judge application. We've updated it, and along with that, we are going to selectively invite some of our most experienced judges and our most talented judges. We will also take recommendations from coaches and teams. So if you have ideas of people that you think we should look into, we will do that. And we'll also have some of our judge trainers provide recommendation. Our goal is to create more panels if we can. That way it's not just a select few individuals. We didn't have enough to fill a full panel the first time. We would like to have more panels than that. That way we can split it out, and maybe you only have to judge certain events, or you judge a gender category. And that way each judge doesn't have to judge as many files as they would have if there was only one panel. We're also looking at technology to help speed up the backend process in terms of our video file transfer, data entry, and more. And this is all in an effort to try and speed up the turnaround in certifying scores for you. I did also want to mention that IJRU, because of their postponement, made several changes to the competition rules. If you're interested in that, I'll post the link in the chat. You can go take a look at more of those. They actually have a way that you can view any of the changes that are made on the most recent version. Some of those rule changes could significantly change how routines are scored. Some of those changes include presentation of routines now being able to increase or decrease the routine score by 60%, whereas it had been 35%. Also, there's a repeated skills deduction that's been changed slightly, and it will only apply to difficulty levels 3 and above. With that, we asked the question to the membership how you want to see us handle that rule change. The majority selected a rescoring option, and so we will be adding those judges, and the new panels that we build will rescore the top 10 routines on the leaderboard. And that's so that the athletes that have competed will be compared by the same panel of judges in trying to make it as fair as we can. With that rescoring process, if you know that you're not going to compete at IJRU 2021, just definitely not going to compete, we'd love if you could let us know that. That way our leaderboard can reflect people that are in contention for qualifying. If you're interested in doing that, I'll post a link as well, and you can fill out the form and reach out to events@amjrf.com. The last thing I'm going to talk about is we are exploring ways to hold virtual competitions. Some of this will depend a little bit on what's decided by IJRU. The beauty of our leaderboard process and certification and using videos is that it's flexible. So we have a range of options, and we are working on testing some of those. And it's also kind of provided a platform for us to hold virtual events and tournaments. So if you're interested in further details on some of the virtual event options, I'm going to post a link in the chat for that. And the last thing I'll say is a lot of this has been communicated on Tuesday in our national ranking update that you should have received an email for. But yeah, thanks so much for all of you that have taken the time to come out to our tournaments and compete. We love seeing your athletes out there. And if you have questions about any of this, let us know in that Q&A session, or drop a comment or a question in the chat, and we will try to get to that in our Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
All right, and speaking of events, let's talk more about those for this year. So when it comes to hosting an event, we understand that that really depends on where you are and what your current local guidelines are. So the competition committee has done a really thorough job of looking at different options of hosting events, whether or not that is completely virtual, partially virtual, or in person. So we're going to be contacting host teams and teams that have hosted events in the past to work through what some of those events may look like with the different options. And then making sure that we can support our teams throughout this uncertain season and keep our athletes involved and jumping. So when it comes to sanctioning events, previously we had a flat rate of $200 to host a regular sanctioned event and $400 for a national ranking event. And given the COVID situation, we understand that things will not be so clear cut. And so that was a huge reason why we totally reworked how the sanctioning structure is going to go for next year. So for this year, actually. So instead of being a flat rate, we're now going to have different services offered a la carte at a cost per person. So what that does is it lowers the barriers of entry for an event so that if you want to host an event that only has 20 people, you're not paying $200 to make it happen. And it also just lets us be more flexible in the COVID era because we're just not quite sure what to expect. So this allows us to be as flexible as possible. So this is just a quick breakdown here of the 3 different types of services we're going to be offering for sanctioning events. The full table and a more descriptive list of what the sanctioning updates are is available in that season report from the AMJRF homepage. And let's go to our next slide. All right, and so this morning we had the IJRU General Congress. And so here are some updates from that. And I believe we're going to have either Dave or Tom take this one.
Hello again, it's Tom. Basically, there's a number of things that are going on from IJRU. And the big thing is, one thing is they talked about their strategic plan for the next 5 years. And so they're going to be pursuing other sponsorships, monetizing broadcasting rights, greater participation in multi-sport events, and pursue additional IJRU events. Those just some of the areas that they are going to start looking at to increase revenue for themselves. The other big announcement this morning was that the 2021 championship will be a virtual only championship. There will not be an in-person championship, and we'll get to some of these questions. I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of questions about this one. So we'll be getting to those questions in the Q&A, but so those are the 2 big announcements from them. Thank you. Back to Brian.
You're on mute, Brian.
You'd think I'd be good at this by now. All right, thanks guys. So that wraps up the presentation part of this town hall. We're gonna open up the floor for a Q&A. We just ask that you keep questions constructive and that we're leaving enough space for everyone to make sure that they have their voices heard. So Dave has been keeping an eye out on the chat panel so far, and I think we have some questions already. So he'll be acting as moderator. Dave, whenever you have some questions for us, let's hear them.
So it's not too busy on the chat channel, but let me just kind of reemphasize, folks, if you have anything top of mind, please put it in the chat channel. We can get to it. We do have some pre-questions we'll throw out there. And in addition, let me just say this, that if we are not able to get to your question and answer it on today's call, we will be reviewing the recording to make sure that we've got all questions answered and put into a frequently asked questions document, and go from there. So I will say this, we've got one of the questions right off the bat is from Yvonne, and she wanted to know if we could go back to the sanctioning slide and further explain that, if we could, Noah.
Sure. So I guess breaking down the table a little bit more. Like I said earlier, this is going to be an a la carte option. So if you want to strictly have, let's say, just a workshop, you would not need the competition system or a national ranking as part of your event. And so you'd be adding a 50-cent additional per person fee to your registration. That would then give you access to Sports Engine for the actual registration for your event and all the reporting that comes out of it. Let's say you want to have a full-on national ranking event. You'd likely want to use the general registration, which is Sports Engine. You'd also want to use the competition system as well as our national ranking leaderboard video. So in that case, it would be utilizing all of these costs here and just adding that as a per person charge to your registration. And that way, like I said before, we're not charging you $400 if you're just doing a national ranking event with 20 people who are possibly submitting video. The one little caveat I will say is that there's a minimum of $50 to sanction your event and a maximum of $400. So you'll never pay more than $400 or less than 50. And the area in between is just determined by the number of people that you have signing up for your event and the services that you're using per person. So I hope that answers the question a little bit more.
We're going to come right back to you, I think, because you have the most experience, at least on the call, with Sports Engine. So Vonda has a follow-up couple questions, and one of them is around running our own reports.
Right. Yeah, so one of the really nice features of Sports Engine is we can give Sports Engine accounts. So let's say you as a user, we can give you particular access to certain registrations. So we can give you direct access to your personal event registration, which then you have a dashboard of different reporting tools that you can pull CSV exports from and run the numbers that you'll need for your event. That's a lot more flexible than the Wild Apricot system that we had used before, which required you to email someone on the board and they would then send you a report kind of an ad hoc basis. This makes the tools and reporting available to you whenever you need them.
And then there was another question around what, if we could clarify what technical support means for general registration.
Sure, that could be just building the form itself. We have a lot more experience in the different ins and outs of Sports Engine and kind of the gotchas of the service. So just making sure that your registration is up to snuff how you want it. And making sure that, you know, if there's a weird issue where somebody somehow manages to register twice or their payment doesn't go through, things like that happen. And so we're just going to be there supporting you to make sure you get through it.
There was another question around the proposed $30,000 potentially being earmarked for a U.S. national team. Brian, since you took the financials, do you want to address that?
Sure. We were just getting into the process of registering for IJRU when COVID hit. So again, that was never fully established as part of the budget, but we did want to make sure that we're handling some of the expenses for our IJRU athletes, especially when it comes to, you know, things like uniforms or things that just make athletes feel proud and good about being a part of this sport. We were setting aside some of the money there, not just to cover the required expenses around, like, you know, deposits for rooms and things like that, but just making sure that we're giving a level of status and recognition to these athletes who really deserve it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then let me just, we have one more comment on there. Thank you to Marty for putting this out there, but just to kind of reiterate Tom's kind of call to action around, hey, if you're thinking of hosting some sort of workshop or tournament, please, reach out to us as soon as possible, because we do want to make sure that we get our calendar set as soon as possible as well. So thank you, Marty, for putting that out there. She put that out on the chat to everybody.
Yeah, and not just getting it on the calendar, but also understanding what the needs are for each team in each different area. It's going to be a lot to figure out what those requirements are, but the sooner that we know them, the more that we can help kind of support teams in different areas, make sure that their events happen.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we answered most of the other questions on here. Let me throw out a couple here. So Noah, maybe you could give a quick update on the Collegiate Association.
Sure. We're going through a lot of the same things that AMJRF is currently going through, looking at how we can engage with our student athletes virtually. As a lot of you know, your own kids are athletes. The majority of campuses are currently doing virtual or remote classes or a hybrid of both. So that has affected a lot of the student athlete clubs. There are some that can do in person, which is great, but we will be adjusting and trying to come up with fun and creative virtual opportunities so that our college athletes can stay involved in the sport, most likely virtual throughout this next year.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Looks like we had another question in here with regards to the World Championships in Canada. It comes from Suna. With it being all virtual, will AMJRF attempt to gather the US team in some locations to virtually compete?
I'll take that one, Dave.
Yeah.
So there is, first part of that question says, so there is no IJRU World Championship in Canada, a question mark. So there is not. That will not be held in Canada. It will be all, whatever they do will be all virtual. They don't have a definition for what that looks like yet. They will be announcing that in the next couple months. As soon as we get that information, we'll be passing it on to you guys, athletes and coaches, so you know what's going on. And because of this, we are going to be working on what our season's going to look like and how it's going to affect the U.S. national team.
Thank you. Another question came in around the new age categories. So let's see, this is exactly it. Little confusion around the new age categories being extended and what that means for age groups and who can be paired with who. Chris is on the competition committee. Is this question best directed to you?
I can answer that. So IJRU made the decision to extend their junior ages. So it was 12 to 14. With the postponement of their tournament, they had some countries that had already qualified athletes. And so they moved it to 15 in order to allow those same athletes that had already qualified to compete in 2021 still as juniors. So that's why that was changed. On the IJRU website, it has specifics around who can jump with whom, but essentially, if you want to jump up, you still could do that at a certain age. But that's kind of why that was extended. Now for AMJRF, we don't necessarily have to do that in some of our tournaments, but in terms of qualifying for the national team, we are going to follow those age divisions and categories.
Thanks, Chris. Stacy, I hope that answers your question. Ernesto, you have a really broad question there. It says, any update on the U.S. rivalry? And I'm just curious, can you define U.S. rivalry? So while he's doing that, what about the questions of, will there be workshops this year? Brian, I think you wanted to address that.
Yeah, sure. Like we had mentioned before, making sure that you reach out to events@amjrf.com if you're thinking of hosting an event, just to make sure that we understand what the needs are there. Definitely, we intend to provide support for events, whether they're virtual or in person, because kids just need to get back to jumping in some level of normal around these times. So the answer is yes, there will be some form of fall workshop season, it will find out exactly what form it takes relatively shortly.
Cool, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks Ernesto for the clarification. So I guess he was referring to, and Tom, I'm going to kind of send this one to you, but working with all other USA organizations.
Sure. Currently, we're still trying to work with all the organizations. I have an email out to AAU again. Unfortunately, a lot of things have stopped during the COVID timeframe, so it's been on hold there. Hopefully, we can get those talks restarted. And we are currently in communications with USAJR on trying to work through a possibility of a combined tournament for nationals. And that's, unfortunately, that's about all we can talk about right now because of the agreement we have between the two organizations. So the answer is yes, we're still trying to work through things, trying to unite the sport in the United States. So that's kind of what the status is on that.
Thank you. All right, we got a question around kind of tournament format or proposed tournament format. Looks like we are recommending, and this is a quote from the question chat area, recommending kind of an asynchronous tournament. Is that the plan going forward, or are we going to work on supporting a synchronous tournament as well?
Yeah, we would be supporting both. I think that we already know how to support synchronous tournaments. The only additional wrinkle there would be around some of the COVID monitoring guidelines that are enforced by local laws. So we already know what the ball game is there. So yes, we do intend to support synchronous events. The bigger question is how do we support various types of asynchronous events? And so that's what we're going to be looking into more this fall.
If I can also add on, in terms of virtual synchronous tournaments, we do want to caution people, if you're having judges try and judge from like a live stream or a video call, I think a number of you have seen with video calls, sometimes there's a little bit of buffering or a delay, which makes it very challenging to judge. So from a virtual aspect, we might not recommend having a synchronous tournament where you're trying to judge live, but again, that's up to you as the host, and we can try and support you as best we can.
That's a good point, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you. And that was David's follow-up question too. So thank you much. All right, kind of throwing out here about a couple AMJRF overviews. So first and foremost, any update on a 2021 AMJRF National Championship and approximate date when you might have the event or the idea behind the event?
Sure. We would probably be looking around the late June, early July timeframe. The intent is to have a national championship. That should be clear. Just given the newest announcement by IJRU and seeing how things unfold during this upcoming fall season, whether or not that event is held virtually or in person is, I think, at this point in question. So the answer is there will be a national championship. The form that it takes is still undetermined.
Cool, thank you. All right, thanks, Amanda. Hey, David, I just wanted to make sure that we were able to answer your asynchronous and synchronous question. If you could just reply back there in the chat channel. And then Monica wants to know, will AMJRF provide a virtual option for qualifying for IJRU Worlds?
Well, I believe there will be a process of some sort. One of the things is we kind of been doing that. We have the basis for that already in place from our qualification process from last year. So the next question would be, how do we extend that to the virtual tournament, if you would? So that we're working on that right now, trying to figure out how that will look exactly. So we don't have a final answer on it, but we're working it. We'll let you know as soon as we do.
I can also add that in looking at virtual options, we have multiple ways that we can do it, and are kind of anticipating what could happen. Once we have some more published details from IJRU, we can adjust as needed and take a look at how that affects our qualifying process. But at the moment, I think we just know publicly that there will be a virtual tournament. And once we have some more details around that, we can speak to the qualifying process a bit more. But on that virtual events document that we shared, it does mention certification. We had been having people only have one chance to compete at in-person tournaments. And so depending on what IJRU publishes, we can take a look at that as well.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, thank you, Chris. Tom. All right, from Rochelle, with regards to judges, what is the lowest number of judges you will sit to judge national team events, and what is the direction you will take if your numbers are low again?
I can speak to that. So I don't think we were going to take any less than the 3 judges that we had, and that's so that we can drop an outlier score if needed. Also, that's kind of based on with the IJRU roles, you need to have at least 3 difficulty judges. And so they judged as each role this past time. We want to try to avoid that. We also have some people lined up already that can step in. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to take a number of different ways to do that and not just have it based on an application. And so we need all of you really to help out where you can. If you have ideas of people that are interested in helping judge and are certified, even if they're not certified yet, we will work to get them through that process. So if you are interested, if you have judges, please let us know, and we will try to build out our panels a bit more this year.
And to add a little bit more to that, we're looking to have at least 1 full panel of 9 judges, preferably 3 panels of 9 judges. So quick numbers there, it's 27 judges that we're looking to get. So it's going to take an effort from the entire community to get to that point so that this, the qualification process works as well as we want it to for the athletes. So this is for the athletes. And so we're going to be reaching out to coaches and judges to recommend judges, because that was a big problem. We heard you loud and clear from last year. We heard all the athletes. So we're making changes to improve the process. So I appreciate everybody thinking about it and getting back to us with names of highly qualified judges.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody. Do we need to wait for January to get recertified to judging as in the past?
I believe IJRU is working hard at this point to publish recertification courses a bit sooner than that. At the moment, they're not currently available, but once they're available, we can let you know about that.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. One thing around the recent IJRU announcement, like a couple hours ago, are they still planning on doing a senior, junior, and open virtual championship, all 3 aspects to the championship?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm pretty sure so far, at least in the chat channel, I could just put another call out there. If there's any other questions, we've tried to do our best to answer these with the information we've got. Let me throw one more kind of subject question out there, and that was with regards to a publishing of our strategic plan. I believe I raised my hand to answer that. I'll just say this to everybody who's interested in that, is that we literally we're waiting for the ratification of IJRU's strategic plan, which just happened a couple hours ago. And as a board, just before the meeting, we were discussing it. And our idea is to get ours going and publish it second half of this competition season. So be on the lookout for that. All right. If there's not any other questions, we can keep this chat open for a few more minutes or so. But Brian, it looks like we've gone through all the questions, immediate questions that have come to mind and in the chat channel.
Yeah, I think we can just hold for a couple minutes and see if anything comes to folks' mind about, events, national championship competition, even just basic practices, stuff like that. So we'll hold for a second and see if anybody has any more questions.
Yeah. So we had just had one pop in with a couple pop in. Here we go. What are some of the other coaches doing with their teams now at practices?
Mm-hmm. I won't speak for everyone, but I've seen a mix of in-person practices, some indoors, some outdoors, spaced apart. And then I've also seen Zoom practices. I participated as a guest coach in one here in Seattle. Some folks have it really mapped out on Zoom when it comes to the style. They have the headphone with music playing in the background and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, just any form of connection with the kids is super helpful at this point. Yeah, so we have some folks in the chat.
Yeah, they are, David. They are pouring in from your peer coaches there. What's going on? I can see Super Skippers in there. I see Kangaroo Kids. Vaughn answered about what Comet Skippers are doing and such. So I hope that gives you some ideas. All right. The last one I saw here, and this is just comes from us as the board, is for everybody who's joined the call today, how do you like this forum, and do you feel that this was helpful? Seen a couple comments with regards to this, but we'd like to kind of hear from the broader group that's joined the call. We'll let those pour in. And then we also had another question here with obviously the state of uncertainty as each state goes through its periods, I guess, of what phase they're in with regards to COVID and such. Every state seems to be a little bit different. Would we consider doing these types of town hall events at least on a quarterly basis? That's to us.
I think that's a great idea to consider. I mean, the reason why we did this to begin with, I mean, Dave, this is partly your idea along with Gary, is just to reconnect with people in a time where disconnection and kind of hunkering down in your own part of the world has been a priority. So yeah, I think that this kind of open forum has been great, at least for me so far, and it's definitely something we consider to continue doing.
Cool. All positive so far, all positive comments with regards to this forum.
Awesome.
Why don't we, let's give it, Brian, maybe another just 30 seconds or so. We do have 11 minutes left on the clock, but any other questions out there? We'll just encourage. If not, we'll close it out here in about a minute. At least the chat forum, and we can close up here. So. Okay, Brian, it's just some comments coming in more around, oh, here we go. Ernesto is asking, as the Pan American representative for AMJRF, oh, he wasn't asking, he was just saying thank you. Sorry, the comment.
We appreciate that too.
Yeah, we do. All right, Brian, I think over to you.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, so again, thanks everyone for taking the time out of your Saturday to be here. I think that this went really well. In the chat channel, we've been seeing some things about, a coaches forum and just the idea of getting people together and talking and communicating again. I'm all for that. I think that's a fantastic idea. We'll definitely look at ways to do that in the future. Let's see. Yeah, nothing else to cover. We're going to have a recording of this posted to the website. And we will, We'll try to get some of the chat answers recorded as well, just so that people can see what you coaches have had to say about your own feedback and your own questions. And otherwise, we will hopefully be doing this again with you soon. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.